Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Kampir. Let's get started. Tonight on Gravitas, our top focus is on Donald Trump's push for Greenland. That fixation continues, and it's also shaking NATO unity with far-reaching implications. We are telling you how NATO is facing an internal crisis over Trump's push for Greenland. Also on the show for you tonight, Iran putting its military on highest alert given what's happening amid the warfares. We are telling you where things stand. Also getting you the latest on how the Indian stocks reacted to the intensifying US tariff worries. All this and more coming up. The world is watching a deeply troubling moment in global politics unfold, and Donald Trump continues to remain at the heart of it. He is once again fixated on Greenland, a vast ice-covered island that is part of NATO ally Denmark. In fact, the consequences of Trump's actions could also very well shake the very foundation of the NATO alliance. The most powerful member of NATO is openly discussing the possibility of taking territory from another NATO member. This is not just diplomatic noise. This is a direct threat to the NATO's core principle that all members stand together against outside aggression. Let's just break this down. NATO was built in 1949 to face external enemies. First, the Soviet Union, and later threats like Russia, global terrorism. It was never designed to survive a situation where one member turns on another. Article 5, which is the heart of the NATO, says an attack on one is an attack on all. But what happens when the attacker is the United States itself in a way? That question strikes at the NATO's very existence. And both Greenland and Denmark have made it clear the island is not for sale. But there is precedent here. The United States had bought what are now the US Virgin Islands, remember, from Denmark in 1917 for $25 million in gold. And in today's rates, that will be over $600 million. Denmark had initially resisted the deal, but agreed after the United States threatened force after the Second World War. Then US President had made his own offer, remember, to buy Greenland, but was rebuffed. Trump has now repeatedly refused to rule out force to seize Greenland, thereby infuriating allies Denmark and Europe.
As the Danish Prime Minister recently recalled, Greenland is not for sale. It is not for the taking. We are no longer in the era when one could buy or sell Louisiana, and therefore these intimidations must stop. And Denmark knows it can count on the solidarity of European countries, which reaffirmed this through their heads of state and government in a joint statement no later than yesterday.
It is absolutely clear that the fate of Greenland will be decided by the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark, to whose territory Greenland belongs. The principles enshrined in the UN Charter, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the inviolability of borders, must be respected. All questions concerning security in the Arctic region must, of course, be discussed within the NATO framework, and that is what we are doing.
Trump arguing that Greenland is a national security necessity. And there is a strategic reality here. In 2024, it lost 2.5 million liters of fresh water per second. 2.5 million liters of fresh water per second. Melting Arctic ice is opening up new shipping routes. Greenland holds rare minerals, remember, and both Russia and China have increased their military and economic presence in the Arctic. But the strategy does not justify destabilizing your own alliance. At the same time, Donald Trump is pushing for a massive military expansion, a defense budget of $1.5 trillion by 2027. He calls it a dream military funded by tariffs and designed for what he describes as troubled and dangerous times. In fact, Washington is preparing for future great power conflicts with Beijing, Moscow, and beyond, reportedly. But in doing so, it may be unraveling the very alliance that has actually kept Europe stable for decades. Regarded as the world's largest security alliance, NATO is already strained by the war in Ukraine. Allies are struggling to maintain unity, be it supplying Kiev or a plan for Europe's long-term security for that matter. A confrontation over Greenland would divert attention, divide allies, and also undermine trust. Very important. Experts are warning that NATO's credibility in itself is at stake. When a leading member undermines another or tries to undermine another, it sends out a clear message to the world that the alliance is fracturing from within. And if the NATO were to weaken or collapse, there is one man who would celebrate the loudest, of course, the Russian president. Moscow for years has dreamt of a divided West. NATO has been the single greatest obstacle to Russian expansion and power. A broken NATO would basically hand the Kremlin a historic strategic victory without a single shot fired. Imagine that. China, of course, would also take note. And this is what is happening in Greenland. And this is why it matters. Shifting focus now to Iran, a lot happening there. It's placed its armed forces on the highest level of alert, in fact, as the violence linked to the ongoing protests coincides with renewed fears of a wider regional confrontation. Iranian state media reporting that hundreds of units from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, as well as Iran's regular army, are now on full operational readiness, amid what officials describe as mounting external threats from the United States as well as Israel. And on Thursday, Iran's foreign minister has said the country is prepared for both war and negotiations amid concerns about military strikes against Iran by Israel and the United States.
We are fully prepared for any situation. We don't want war, but we are ready for war. We are also ready for negotiations, but only negotiations that are based off mutual interests and respect.
Iranian military commanders, in fact, say the move is defensive in nature, aimed at deterrence, and insist that the country is prepared to respond to any attack on its territory. At the same time, Iran is grappling with nearly 2 weeks of massive nationwide protests. These protests, driven by economic hardship, sharp price rises, and the collapse of the country's currency. Demonstrations were reported in at least 25 of Iran's 31 provinces. making this one of the most geographically widespread protest movement in recent years. On Wednesday, new protests were reported in several parts. There were protests in Tehran's Shimiran district and also in the Gulf port of Bandar Abbas. Protesters were heard chanting slogans calling for economic relief, political reform, and greater freedom. Because of the scale of the demonstrations, questions have now emerged on whether this is the most serious challenge to Iran's Islamic regime. In fact, authorities say some demonstrations have remained peaceful, but others have turned violent. Iranian news agencies reported attacks on the police, on shops, on religious sites in parts of the country, including deadly clashes in the southwest that left 2 police officers dead. Dozens injured. So far, the violence around the demonstrations reportedly killed at least 38 people. That's the figure at this point, while more than 2,200 others have been detained. The president, Masoud Pezeshkian, earlier publicly urged restraint, remember. According to the state media, he has ordered security forces not to crack down on the demonstrators, drawing a distinction between peaceful protesters and what authorities describe as armed rioters. His office saying law enforcement has been instructed to avoid excessive force while protecting public order and critical infrastructure. But then even as the regime calls for calm at home, Iran's military leadership is warning against pressure from abroad. The commander of Iran's army has said that Tehran would not tolerate any foreign threats without responding. He said that any miscalculations by Iran's adversaries would trigger a stronger response than during last June's brief conflict with Israel. His comments, in fact, following recent warnings, remember, from US President Donald Trump as well as the Israeli Prime Minister. Trump warned Tehran against killing protesters, and then Netanyahu expressed support for the protesters in Iran, in a way framing it as a struggle for freedom. Comments that Iranian officials view as outside interference. And these statements have heightened concern in Iran, particularly after Washington's recent capture of the Venezuelan president, which also raised anxiety among some Iranian officials about the precedent that those developments could set. And adding to all of this is the fact that Kurdish opposition parties based in Iraq have also called for a general strike in Iranian Kurdish regions. They have accused the Iranian authorities of heavy-handed tactics. Just for context here, Tehran has long regarded these groups as security threats, and any escalation in the border regions could further strain an already fragile situation. For now, Iran's leadership saying they remain firmly in control, backed by a powerful network of military, political, religious institutions. Despite what the critics are saying, regional observers are also saying that leadership change is unlikely in the near term. Yes, with protests continuing and the economy under pressure in this manner, regional tensions are running high. And the coming days will be critical in determining whether restraint holds or whether rising violence and war fears push this crisis into an even more dangerous phase. Shifting focus now to the United States. In Minneapolis, residents are angry and they have gathered for a vigil. What are they demanding? They want government accountability after a U.S. immigration officer shot and killed a woman during an enforcement operation, an incident that is now raising urgent questions about the use of force and immigration policing in the United States at this point. The woman, identified by local media as a 37-year-old, was shot inside her car as immigration officers approached and attempted to open her door. Video footage showing one masked immigration and customs enforcement agent firing 3 times as the vehicle of that woman begins to pull away. And as the car and the driver is shot at. It veers out of control, crashes into parked vehicles. The woman was later seen slumped inside the wrecked vehicle, bleeding heavily. She died at the scene.
What? They just shot at somebody.
I hear 3 gunshots, and then I hear a car crash, and then I come out out the house. I see this lady hugging the victim. It's the lady wife. So the wife is hugging her victim, hugging her wife and stuff like that.
So what exactly happened in those moments, and what does that tell you about the state of America at this point? Federal authorities saying the officer acted in self-defense. Homeland Security Secretary, in fact, called the incident a tragedy and avoidable, but then later went on to describe the incident as an act of domestic terrorism, accusing the woman who was killed of weaponizing a vehicle.
ICE agents repeatedly ordered her to get out of the car and to stop obstructing law enforcement, but she refused to obey their commands. She then proceeded to weaponize her vehicle, and she attempted to run a law enforcement officer over. This appears as an attempt to kill or to cause bodily harm to agents, an act of domestic terrorism. The ICE officer, fearing for his life and the other officers around him and the safety of the public, fired defensive shots. He used his training to save his own life and that of his colleagues.
Even US President Donald Trump accused the victim of viciously running over the agent. But then local leaders there sharply reject that account. The mayor, Jacob Frey, accused the Trump administration of mischaracterizing the incident, urging the federal immigration officers to leave the city. The Minnesota governor, meanwhile, called the federal response propaganda, pledging a full, fair and expedited investigation. America is outraged. The shooting has also sparked immediate protests across Minneapolis, with thousands taking to the streets despite the freezing temperatures.
For far too long to this country, and it was the native people.
Let's burst down the sidewalk.
Take a stand!
Rise up! Take the stand! No justice! Power to the people!
The demonstrators carried signs demanding an end to federal immigration operations in the city.
We will not put up with ICE.
Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Who keeps us safe?
We keep us safe.
Tell me what community looks like.
Community looks like.
The woman's killing after 9:30 a.m. was recorded on video by witnesses. The shooting quickly drew a large crowd of angry protesters, and by evening, hundreds were there for a vigil to mourn her death, urging the public to resist immigration enforcers. Some held signs opposing the immigration agency and chanted, "No Trump, no troops, we will not put up with ICE." Listen in.
Tell me what community looks like.
This is what community looks like.
Tell me what community looks like.
This is what community looks like.
No Trump, no Trump, no truth, no truth. Twin cities ain't Lincoln.
And in New York, people carried out protests against the immigration agency. On social media, netizens expressed outrage. Critics questioned, where does one even draw the line between law enforcement and violence? And at what point does an attempt to flee become a lethal threat?
I want to thank you for being a real New Yorker. Estamos en la lucha. Ice out of New York! Ice out of New York! Ice out of New York! They are separating children.
Now, just for further context, the shooting took place during protest activity against immigration enforcement in southern Minneapolis. Remember, the agents have been at the forefront of the Trump administration's aggressive deportation drive, which basically aims to remove what the officials describe as millions of undocumented migrants. In order to do so, the Department of Homeland Security, in fact, has expanded recruitment, adding thousands of new agents. A move that critics also say risks placing insufficiently trained officers into high-pressure situations. And as for the victim herself, here's what we know so far. As per reports, she was a U.S. citizen. She had no past legal issues aside from a traffic ticket, reportedly. She was a mother of 3. She had moved to Minneapolis last year and, according to the Minnesota Star-Tribune, was living in the city with her current partner and her youngest son. Her ex-husband reportedly told news agencies that she had dropped off her 6-year-old son at school and was driving home when they encountered a group of immigration agents on the street. So even though the Trump administration officials have tried to label her as a radical leftist and a domestic terrorist, quote unquote, her ex-husband says she was not an activist and never participated in any protest. For now, investigations are underway. Protests continue, but America, and especially Minneapolis, continues to mourn. On to India. Indian stocks fell on Thursday to extend losses for the 4th straight session. Benchmarks also marking their worst session in more than 4 months amid the intensifying U.S. tariff worries. The blue chip Sensex index fell nearly 785 points to below 84,200 mark. The 30-share index has lost about 1,600 points, in fact, this week so far. The broader Nifty index, meanwhile, crashed over 1% to below 25,900. Just last week, the 50-share Nifty benchmark had hit a fresh all-time high, remember, of 26,373 points. But then the latest sell-off wiped out about 7 lakh crore rupees, about $78.75 billion in investor wealth. US President Donald Trump, remember, has warned of higher tariffs on Indian goods over Russian oil purchases, even as New Delhi seeks a trade deal. A bipartisan US bill proposing tariffs of up to 500% on countries trading with Russia has won Trump's backing. The legislation will need for congressional approval. America has already imposed tariffs of 50% on Indian goods. Half of those penalties are tied to New Delhi's Russian crude imports. The country has managed to expand its export destinations and shield the economy from the current U.S. tariffs. However, the magnitude of the planned tariffs will likely hurt the Indian economy more deeply. And then the tariff uncertainty, it has intensified the exodus of foreign funds from the Indian markets. Foreign investors have offloaded shares worth $694 million so far in January after record outflows in 2025. That despite a healthy growth reading for the domestic economy, which is still the fastest growing major economy. Other Asian markets, meanwhile, fell 0.7%, rattled by Trump's latest tariff threat. Global stocks also slipped as traders grapple with Trump's various policies. The sell-off in markets also coming after Trump followed his intervention in Venezuela, with moves targeting the U.S. housing and defense industries, signaling further volatility in the second year of his latest term. A quick look now at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. With Donald Trump pulling the U.S. out of 66 global bodies, what lies ahead and what is the bigger picture? Has China got Japan's critical nuclear secrets? We tell you why this question is being asked. All this and more coming up. Is Israel stepping into an issue that could be the spark for a wider war? During a tour of Western Negev, the Israeli Prime Minister has said that he will, quote-unquote, return the Negev to the state of Israel. And Netanyahu made those comments in context of governance and development, but then in a region historically shaped by disputes, politics, strategic military interests. Those words carry a lot of weight. Let's just play out the statement.
We are coming to return the Negev to the state of Israel. This means settlement on a scale we have never known before. It means arrangements for the Bedouin residents as well. But first and foremost, it means the restoration of law and order.
The Negev is not just a desert. It accounts for nearly 60% of Israel's land. Israel's first Prime Minister, remember, described control of the Negev as essential to the state's survival. A view still shared by Israel's security establishment bordering Egypt and close to Gaza, the region hosting major military bases and acting as Israel's southern buffer. The Red Sea port of Eilat also providing Israel with vital maritime access to the Indian Ocean and global trade routes. Negev has also been a strategically vital and contested region between Israel and Egypt due to its location on the border and its use in military operations. Whether it was during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, the 1956 Suez Crisis, 1967 Six-Day War, or the 1973 Yom Kippur War. But the Negev is also home to the Bedouin tribe. Around 300,000 Arab Bedouins live there. Many in villages the Israeli state has refused to recognize since the country's creation in 1948. And their own identity is rather complex. Many identify themselves as Bedouin Israelis, while others see themselves as Palestinian citizens of Israel. Human rights groups saying decades of demolitions, land confiscations, lack of basic services by the Israeli establishment reportedly created a permanent state of tensions there. And during his visit to the region, Netanyahu described Negev as, quote-unquote, out of control with collapsing crime, arms smuggling, national security posing a threat.
The Negev is out of control. We will rein it in, and an important operation by the Israeli police has begun.
And then earlier today, the Israeli president convened an emergency meeting with heads of local authorities from the Negev region in southern Israel. The meeting was held to address the escalation of violence and crime in Arab society, with a particular focus on the situation in the Negev. Last year was the deadliest year for Arab citizens of Israel. More than 250 died over the course of 2025 reportedly, and just over a week into this year, at least 11 Arab citizens have died in violence-related incidents. So then, is the Israeli government trying to improve the security situation in Negev, or is there something else at play here entirely? We are asking that question because during Netanyahu's latest tenure as Prime Minister, Israel has often found itself embroiled in conflicts, especially at a time when Netanyahu is facing mass protests by the Israeli people, legal hurdles. The way things stand right now, Netanyahu's Negev push may promise order, but history suggests it could deliver something far more sinister. Moving on now, the dramatic U.S. military capture of Venezuela's leader appears to have reignited hope in Kiev and emboldened the Ukrainian president to push for stronger action against Moscow. Zelensky is now urging the United States to turn up the pressure on Russia once again, and this time by targeting one of Putin's closest allies, Chechen strongman Ramzan Kadyrov. Zelensky has said the operation against Maduro proved that Washington has the tools, the capability and the will to act decisively when it chooses to. He argued that if the United States can remove a dictator from power in South America, it could also apply similar pressure on Russia's power structure. That statement on your screen. Now, Zelensky has said removing Kadyrov would send out a powerful signal to Putin and also force him to think twice about continuing the war against Ukraine. Ramzan Kadyrov has ruled Chechnya since 2007. He is one of Putin's most loyal and vocal supporters, once a breakaway region that fought bloody wars against Moscow. Chechnya is now kept firmly under Kremlin control. And through Kadyrov's personal loyalty to the Russian president, he has sent thousands of Chechen fighters in Ukraine since the war began. And last year, Ukraine filed war crime charges against him over his treatment of Ukrainian prisoners of war. Since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Chechen forces loyal to Kadyrov, often called the Kadyrovites, have played a visible role in the war. They were deployed early, featured heavily in propaganda, and also presented as feared and disciplined fighters supporting Russia's offensive. Units have claimed participation in major operations, including the siege of Mariupol, and have been used by Moscow to protect the image of a multi-ethnic Russian force united behind Putin's war effort. Analysts noting that the Chechen role has been as much political and psychological as it has been purely a military one. While some Chechen fighters engaged in combat, many were reported to be operating away from the front lines, serving in security, enforcement, intimidation roles. And for the Kremlin, the value of Chechen forces lies not only in firepower but also in loyalty, also fear, symbolism. It reinforced Putin's control over Russia's regions and showed that even former enemies now fight for the Russian state. And Kadyrov himself has taken an extremely hardline position on Ukraine. Previously, repeatedly, he called for escalation, even floating the idea of using nuclear weapons. And his rhetoric has made him a key voice in Russia's war narrative. He responded with angry and derisive comments, accusing Zelensky of cowardice and mocking the idea that Ukraine's president would rely on others to deal with his enemies. For Ukraine, it's now nearly 4 years into that full-scale war. Zelensky is using every example out there to argue that stronger and more direct pressure could change the course of this war. But he should not forget that Russia is a nuclear-armed power. Any direct operation against its leaders or regional strongmen would carry serious consequences. And the suggested method could escalate the conflict far beyond Ukraine, perhaps. Is the United Nations dying in plain sight? Because the United States is once again stepping away from the very institutions meant to hold the international system together, raising fresh doubts about whether agencies like the United Nations still have a future. The Trump administration has announced withdrawal from dozens of international bodies, many of them linked directly to the United Nations. President Trump has signed an executive order suspending U.S. support for 66 international organizations, agencies, and commissions after a comprehensive review of American funding and participation. And the list includes the UN's Population Agency and the treaty framework that governs global climate negotiations, several other UN-affiliated panels dealing with climate change, labor, migration, development also face U.S. withdrawal. The administration has labeled many of these institutions as ideologically driven, inefficient, or misaligned with American priorities. According to the Secretary of State, Washington considers these organizations redundant, poorly managed, wasteful, or compromised by special interests, further claiming that continued participation threatens U.S. sovereignty, economic strength, national freedom. The UN climate chief has said the decision by the United States to withdraw from a global climate treaty would quote-unquote only harm the U.S. economy, jobs, and living standards. A colossal own goal in a way which will leave the U.S. less secure and less prosperous. The pullback, though, does not stop with the United Nations. The administration is also exiting non-UN platforms such as the Partnership for Atlantic Cooperation, the International Institute for Democracy, Electoral Assistance, the Global Counter-Terrorism Forum. This decision coming at a time when US foreign policy has already unsettled allies and rivals with the capture of the Venezuelan leader, and America weighing options to take over Greenland. We just told you about that. The Trump administration has already suspended or withdrawn support from the World Health Organization, the UN Human Rights Council, UNESCO, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Not just that, it also shifted to a selective pick-and-choose approach to paying UN dues, funding only operations that allegedly align with Trump's agenda. America has formally exited the Paris Climate Agreement once again after Trump returned to power last year, remember. It also moved to withdraw from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the foundational treaty behind global climate action. And the consequences are already visible. UN agencies and partner organizations have started cutting staff and scaling back programs. Several independent humanitarian groups reporting project closures following deep reductions in US foreign assistance, including funding through US aid. Experts warn that without US participation, global efforts to address issues like climate change and other transnational crises could slow dramatically. As Washington steps away, the question is only growing louder. Can the United Nations survive when one of its most influential members, the United States, walks out? Donald Trump, meanwhile, out to make peace again. No troops and airstrikes are on the anvil. This time, a luxury ski resort is being touted as a way to patch up things between Israel and Syria. The two countries share a fractured relationship. Israel controls Golan Heights, which it captured from Syria in 1967, while the UN created a 400 square kilometer area of separation between Golan Heights and Syria. After the war in 1973, Israeli forces entered into the demilitarized zone in 2024 after the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime. And now Trump is proposing a ski resort as part of an economic zone in the demilitarized zone occupied by the Israeli forces. It will be jointly backed by Israel and Syria. The ski resort could be situated in Mount Hermon, which towers over southern Syria. It is believed that Israel not only has installed formidable surveillance capability, but also trains its troops there. And as per reports, oil pipelines, data centers, pharmaceutical plants and other commercial projects are also in the pipeline. Most importantly, the plan moots that the resort will be mostly run by members of the Druze community whom Israel wants to protect. It's likely to be operational after Israeli forces vacate the demilitarized zone, which has been a key demand of the Syrian president, Ahmad al-Shara. And while the plan is yet to be officially confirmed by Israel and Syria, both countries held talks in Paris recently, and they have reached an agreement to facilitate intelligence sharing, military de-escalation, and commercial ventures between them. Incidentally, the ski resort is not the first grand idea floated by the US president. Just a few months ago, the US proposed an area entailing a port city bordered by AI-powered high-tech megacities. It also involved the forced displacement, reportedly, of Gaza's entire population. Has China got Japan's critical nuclear secrets? This story revolves around a lost mobile phone. No ordinary one. This phone belonged to an employee of Japan's nuclear regulator, Japan's Nuclear Regulation Authority, that was formed after the Fukushima disaster in 2011. So clearly, when that employee lost his phone, alarm bells rang out. The employee reportedly lost his phone containing highly sensitive information in China while on a personal trip in November. You can only imagine the panic and concern that followed. How worried should Japan be? Have critical secrets landed in Beijing's lap? What all did the phone contain, you wonder? The phone reportedly had the name and contact details of staff in charge of nuclear security. You can imagine how serious the matter is. How exactly did this even happen? The employee reportedly misplaced his phone after going through a security check at Shanghai airport and realized 3 days later. According to reports, he could not find the device despite reaching out to the airport authorities. Now, here's why this is all the more concerning. Look at the timing, the context. This comes against the backdrop of Japan approving the decision to revive its atomic energy program nearly 15 years after the Fukushima disaster that led to a total nuclear shutdown. What else is known at this point? Here's what's happened. Reportedly, the country's Personal Information Protection Commission was informed about the incident. According to reports, it issued a warning against carrying work phones abroad. So this development clearly has had far-reaching implications. A few NRA staff reportedly are required to carry disaster prevention smartphones in case of nuclear accidents or major earthquakes. As of now, this lost mobile phone and all the concern around the potential consequences is something that Japan cannot afford to take lightly. The big pharma giants promise transformation in a syringe. Quick weight loss, minimal effort, maximum hope. But the body, it seems, has its own plans. A new study is showing that after one stops taking the weight loss jabs, the body puts on kilos within 2 years. The miracle cure could be a fleeting illusion, leaving millions trapped in a cycle of metabolic heartbreak. Take a look.
Blockbuster jabs like Ozempic, Zepbound and Wegovy promised a permanent escape from obesity. The weight loss medication market could reach $150 billion by 2035. Now, a major new study has found that people who discontinue popular weight loss injections regain most of the weight they lost within 2 years, sometimes sooner, sometimes faster than expected. The research, led by academics at the University of Oxford and published in the BMJ, delivers a sobering reality check to the global weight loss boom. The analysis reviewed 37 clinical studies involving 9,041 participants who used weight loss medications, including GLP-1 drugs that have exploded in popularity. These injections suppress appetite, slow digestion, and help users shed kilos rapidly. But once treatment ends, the biological brakes come off.
What I was surprised by is that after drug treatment, the rate of regain is much faster than we see after regular dieting, faster than I would have expected. We don't know exactly why that's the case, but what I would speculate is that when you're having a dietary program, you have to work really hard to control your appetite.
The findings raise urgent questions as weight loss jabs spread across clinics, pharmacies, and social media feeds. Celebrities promote them, influencers push them, and we tend to believe them. Demand keeps climbing. But the study warns against seeing injections as a short-term fix. Experts stress that, without long-term treatment or sustained lifestyle changes, weight regain is highly likely. Some compare the drugs to blood pressure medication, effective but only while taken. Doctors also flag another concern. Many patients stop treatment due to side effects, cost, or supply shortages. In the US, monthly prescriptions can cost hundreds of dollars without insurance. When access ends, so does the effect.
People's weight regain was not different depending on whether they were provided support during the treatment or after. So weight regain was the same regardless of what support was provided alongside the medication. As people regained the weight, the improvements in cardiovascular outcomes also were lost.
The message from researchers is blunt. Weight loss injections work, they are powerful, but they are not a cure.
thousands of lives impacted after being robbed of their hard-earned money. Fake romantic relationships, exciting investment deals orchestrated from scam compounds in Cambodia have become a global menace. The plot thickened with the seizure of $15 billion in Bitcoin last year. And finally, the mastermind of that scam has been brought to justice. Chen Zi, a billionaire businessman accused of spearheading a vast cryptocurrency scam, was among 3 people arrested in Cambodia and extradited to China. This scam involved luring of traffic workers to forced labor camps, where they defrauded victims globally. Let's just take a closer look at the man. He was born in China's Fujian province in 1987 and formed the Prince Group at the mere age of 27. This conglomerate is believed to have operated over 100 business entities in close to 30 countries. In the year 2014, he acquired the citizenship of Cambodia. The Prince Group has been under the scanner of the law enforcement agencies in China since 2020, in fact. And he faced his first impact, his first blow, after being indicted by the US in October last year for money laundering charges. US even seized $15 billion held in Bitcoin. The trouble compounded after Cambodia recently suspended operations of Prince Bank, which is a subsidiary of the Prince Group. Meanwhile, Chinese authorities revealing that the scam mastermind was stripped of his Cambodian nationality in December last year by a royal decree. This has become the basis for China to establish its jurisdiction in holding him legally accountable. Previously, governments around the world, including the UK, South Korea, Taiwan, have also seized assets related to his group. It is worth noting here that this scam mastermind also faces a sentence of 40 years in the US if convicted. Even as the menace of global scam compounds continues, his arrest has triggered a ray of hope for those trapped in these hellholes and for millions of vulnerable people around the world. Shifting focus now to a growing global controversy around artificial intelligence, free speech and accountability. Yes, I am talking about Elon Musk's platform X and its AI tool Grok. Because what happens when AI stops being just a tool and could become a weapon? Over the past week itself, we've been telling you constantly about the global backlash that Grok AI has been receiving for allegedly allowing a way through which non-consensual sexualized deepfake videos are being produced of women and minors, of real people on the social media platform. Grok, the AI chatbot integrated into X, is being used to generate thousands of these images. According to Bloomberg, in fact, Grok is producing more than 6,000 nudified or sexually suggestive images every hour. Grok is producing thousands of undressed images per hour on X, allegedly. And experts are saying that the scale is nothing like anything they have ever seen before. Unlike other major AI systems, Grok places far fewer limits on image manipulation. Victims say reporting the images led nowhere. Some say the content stayed online. Others say Grok apologized but continued generating new images anyway, they say. And now regulators around the world are stepping in. The European Commission says it is examining whether Grok violates EU digital safety laws. Britain's media regulator Ofcom has demanded urgent answers from X and XAI. France has expanded an investigation into whether the platform enabled the spread of illegal imagery. Malaysia has launched its own investigation. And India, among one of the first to flag the issue, has ordered X to remove sexualized AI content and demanded what actions X is taking in that direction. Critics argue Grok's so-called spicy mode prioritizes engagement over safeguards. AI policy experts pointing out that rival systems, say from OpenAI, Google, block exactly this kind of content. And what does the X owner, Elon Musk, have to say about all of this? For his part, reportedly, he has defended Grok as more open and irreverent. He has put the onus on the users of the platform, in fact. He says users who generate illegal content should be punished, but not the platform itself, it seems. Plausible deniability. What else would you expect from a Silicon Valley billionaire, perhaps? But as we move towards a world increasingly shaped by AI and technology, legal experts are saying this is not a platform simply hosting content. This is artificial intelligence creating it. So when an AI platform or tool generates an image and amplifies it to millions instantly, can a platform still claim to be neutral? When content causes real-world harm, can the human owners of these platforms really claim they have nothing to do with all of it? They certainly don't step aside when the same platform gets them real profits, real cash, real power. So if credit flows upward, why does responsibility stop there? Because even as Grok faces global backlash, Musk's AI startup xAI has raised $20 billion in fresh funding, backed by major investors and NVIDIA. xAI saying it is building the world's largest AI supercomputer. That Grok now reaches 600 million monthly users, and that newer, more powerful versions are already being trained. So here's the uncomfortable reality that we all need to face. Is the AI race moving faster than the rules and laws made by humans meant to contain it? Because for the victims, for those impacted by all of this, the consequences are very real and immediate. Images altered without their consent doing the rounds, careers put at risk, personal lives impacted in such a manner. Also the lifelong trauma. Why should anyone have to go through this? The onus is on the governments. In the US, new laws like the US Take It Down Act, platforms will soon be required to remove this content or face liability. But enforcement is months away. For the governments across the rest of the world, situated far away from Silicon Valley, the challenge is even greater. The technology is being built and deployed thousands of miles away, but the consequences are landing right at home. And that is the gap that they urgently need to address. Deep beneath our feet, a molten fury is churning, Earth's magnetic shield battling cosmic onslaughts, safeguarding life itself, and the shield that protects life on this planet is thinning. This breach is now widening. Could it spell doom? Our next story telling you more.
Magnetic fields are the silent sentinels of our survival. A planetary force field warding off the lethal bombardment of cosmic radiation. Deep beneath our feet, the Earth's outer core, an ocean of molten iron and nickel, churns like a violent dynamo. As this liquid metal twists and flows, it generates massive electrical currents, weaving the invisible shield that protects us all. But now, scientists are watching something unsettling. The South Atlantic anomaly, a vast weak spot sprawling from South America to southern Africa, has ballooned nearly half the size of Europe. Satellites reveal its weakening by 5% per decade, dipping to just a quarter of normal field strength. Particles from space now plunge deeper, zapping satellites and astronauts alike. These regions are exposed to increased levels of radiation, which can cause malfunctions, damage sensitive components, or even lead to temporary blackouts. The cause lies far below our feet. Uneven flows of molten iron and outer core appear to be distorting the magnetic field from within. Is this a sign of an impending magnetic pole reversal? Scientists say that it is not imminent. Such flips take thousands of years. For now, scientists say there is no cause for panic, but there is reason for attention because the planet's oldest shield is changing, and Earth is reminding us, protection is never permanent.
An impersonator in China is quickly gaining fans across both sides of the Atlantic for his uncanny mimicry of US President Donald Trump, a viral social media phenomenon. You perhaps did not see this coming. Take a look.
Change a little bit. Change a little bit. Yeah, of course. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. When you meet a friend in a foreign country, far away from home, different world, different city, but boom, there's someone who knows you. It feels good, it feels safe.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Gravitas Tonight. This is me, Molly Gampir, signing off. Thanks very much for watching.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. To some, it's an extreme ideology. To others, it's the very soul of India. To some, it's rebellion. To others, it's a principle of nation building. Coming soon to challenge perceptions in RSS centenary year, Kesariya at 100.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. Where darkness hides behind every corner. Where the truth is stranger than fiction. A show that dives deep into the stories which shock and mystify. Unsolved murders. Psychopaths who defy explanation. International war crimes. And millions swindled in financial fraud. The victims, the accused, and the sinister plot. Prime Crime is your front row seat to darkness. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Vielleicht nur